Well, if you think we're out of the woods on World War III, you are mistaken. Just notice that every day, either Starmer from Britain, the United Kingdom, which isn't united, by the way, and Macron are either over kissing Zelensky's feet or he is there kissing their feet. And Macron just made the ultimatum to Putin. You have to now accept today the 30-day ceasefire, when Putin already says he accepts it in terms of generalities, but he wants to know what's going to happen to the fact that, remember, we just told you, and it's been on the news all over the place, that Putin went to Kursk. And he got there, he surrounded all the rest of the troops that Zelensky has, and they won't surrender because Zelensky's ordering them not to surrender. That's why he just fired his chief of staff, his top general. He just fired him, replaced him again, this like third or fourth one. Why? Because Zelensky keeps ordering them to their death. He doesn't care. Does he care about those troops? No. Did he care about the Azov troops? No. Did he care about any of them? No. He doesn't care. And so what's going to happen? This is the big issue. Putin is not going to pull out until he secures the entire Kursk Oblast. Mark my words. It ain't going to happen. A ceasefire? Only if the ceasefire includes, as Putin calls it, a permanent peace solution. This is what Putin means by the permanent peace solution. Give me the 5 areas I have taken now by force, and 2 of them did vote me in, vote Russia in, but, the other 3 didn't, but it's okay, I'm taking them. And that's what he demands. He's going to demand that. And I don't know where it's going to go from there, because Zelensky is an insane person at this point, completely insane, because why? He's being told by Macron, his boyfriend, that the $1.1 billion he just spent to buy one of the largest banks in France isn't enough. He needs more of the $270 billion that Zelensky stole, which doesn't count the money that he got for all the weapons that you're seeing now all over the world, which were actually weapons from the entire EU, from all his supporters from all over the world, including America, and they were sold in the black market. Of course, that's how North Korea got its missiles. This is how Iran got its ICBMs. I mean, come on, folks. This is just the stupidest thing I've ever seen in human history. All the corruption of the past, which would be really well hidden under layers of government justification and authorization. No, none of that exists anymore. Now it's just open, as I've said for a long time, even in the World Economic Forum, the Bohemian Grove, all of them. None of those billionaires agree. They're all after each other's money, and they all know who's corrupt. Now, let's go to something. So what is Trump doing? He's going to move forward on that, but you've heard it again. I said it yesterday. I'll say it again today. Britain has an agreement, 2 agreements signed by Zelensky, that all the resources are theirs. The reconstruction is theirs, even though, did you notice what happened with Turkey? Erdogan is one of the slimiest people on the face of the earth. He slimes in wherever the money from human suffering is flowing, and he gets his piece of it. So he has opened more businesses in the last year in Ukraine while it was being bombed than anybody else, so that he could get his foot in the door to try to get the reconstruction money, which will be what? That will be, they think, in the old way, it's always American money. We are tricked by the British with a false flag. We go and we blow the snot out of it. We use up all of our munitions. We get to build up our munitions, so all the military-industrial complex gets to basically restock. And the British don't do they almost never do any of the work. I mean, look at the Iraqi war. What did they do? One little teensy tiny thing with their little tiny group of elite British soldiers. No, they are horrible, horrible. They are going to mess this up at every turn, just like right now, Starmer's in so much trouble for what he's doing that he has to use Macron, the idiot, a useful idiot, to not only suck up, and I mean, Macron was kissing Zelensky over and over again and grabbing him and hugging him and wouldn't let go of him. Why? Because he just bought, he's guaranteeing that Zelensky's going to spend billions of dollars in his country directly under his supervision. That's what this is all about. The oligarchs in all the Russian former nations that were part of the USSR, all the oligarchs are bought out by Goldman Sachs or whoever does the deals to turn basically national industries into industries owned by oligarchs. So that's what's going to happen in Ukraine. Unfortunately, there's a lot of Americans thought they were going to get a big piece of the pie, that they ain't going to get the pie. And Trump is not going to use tax money. He's going to use the money generated, just like in Gaza, the money generated by the resources there to pour right back into the development. That's what you do if you are sane and logical and you don't use USAID as your gravy train. Now, I want to go to something we said yesterday and the day before. And we've said it even before. Because why? A judge had already said that preemptive pardons are stupid. They're illegal. They're fraudulent because you can't give someone a pardon if they haven't been indicted and convicted. So you can't give a preemptive pardon. As I said before, the only ones who have that are Jesuits. Jesuits are given forgiveness for whoever they have to kill for the Pope. And this is literally in their vow. They are pre-forgiven for any sin they do for the Pope. And by the way, Pope's out of the hospital, I'm very sorry to have to say, so he's going to continue to try to force people into America illegally across our borders by using his authority as the head of the Catholic Church, which is just disgusting. But anyway, I think I mentioned this yesterday, and I'm going to mention it again. We need Panama, and we need both the ports, and we need all of Panama, because Panama is the key to stopping people from South America from coming up on boats and going around the Denzian zone. But anyway, let's go back to Trump and auto sign. The Autopen. Everybody knows you can't use an Autopen to sign something that goes in the National Registry. Okay? It goes on display. Every document that the president... Do you know that the gifts given to a president aren't his? You know that everything the president does is for the country? None of that is his. So that Joe Biden had literally 20, 30 boxes in all 5 of his houses, and some of them had top secret still stamped on them. Nothing happened with him because he was, of course, inept, and they said he was not fit to stand trial. With Hillary, we got to see that Perkins Coie saved her because she had the same thing because it was on her server. 1,300 documents that were all still highly classified that she turned in, that she also said weren't there after she scrubbed it and turned in the supposed evidence. But anyway, what we're seeing is great. So we told you before that Mr. Trump simply needs to say that everything Joe Biden Autopen signed, and by the way, you can take a picture of it now with your phone and they can tell you whether it was auto-signed, okay? You can tell, a graphologist can tell. It's 100%. You don't put an auto-signed executive order into the National Registry or into the presidential library of that president. That's insanity, okay? So what's happening here is everything Biden did, and remember, I think Tyler was right. Biden never was the president, and they knew that this was going to happen and that it would all have to be abnegated, it would be vacated, it would have to be nullified, but it would be nullified without any action of Congress. There doesn't need to be any action in this type of fraud. Those documents do make it that you do not have to do anything they said. Now remember, just the other day, 3-4 days ago, Trump signed an executive order getting rid of 18 more of O'Biden together. That makes O'Biden. So those 18 are now null. And they're really major ones. And when he first came in, he nullified, I forget how many, 12 or I thought it was more like 20, but now they've broken it down and maybe this new group of 18 were part of the original 28 that they're only now acting on. I'm not sure. But the point is that he's nullifying most of them. They all need to be nullified. And when he signed the executive order to remove us from the global war on terror, Mr. President, I told you this yesterday, you and Stephen, it's simple. That order has to be thrown out. So we have never pulled out of Afghanistan. Go back to Afghanistan, get our resources, especially the military equipment, claw back any money that has been given to them because they're terrorists. And if the war on terror is back on, then that's right. The Taliban is no longer our friend, Mr. Biden. They were always our enemy. Look what they did when we tried to help them over and over and over again. So the war on terror will include Afghanistan. Go get our equipment. Abnegate all of those signatures of Joe Biden. And then you have to try the fake Joe Biden for treason. How many times have I said, go back? All you have to do, you can't get him anymore. But somebody did it somewhere. I don't know. They must have had it, went back in the way you can go back in time on the internet. But anyway, get a picture of Joe Biden signing something in the past, 20 years ago, and the new Joe Biden. One's left-handed, one's right-handed. They don't even look alike. Look at their earlobes. They're not the same people. So that Joe Biden, and everyone who knew it wasn't Joe Biden, which would be Jill and all the Biden family, but remember Joe Biden had 3 brain aneurysms. He couldn't barely speak or understand when he came out of those operations. So how in the world, when they replaced him back then, and then they replaced him again once he was the president. And the idiot that's there now that is playing Joe Biden he has complete dementia. He doesn't even know where he is. Trump knows that. But why isn't he going after the huge frauds? Because to prove that in a court would also besmear him. It would not be good for him politically. What he needs to do now is move forward on things that help Americans to show that that can be done again in his second term as he did in the first, and then move on. So abnegate all of that. But make sure that your people are not only focused on what we just told you, get rid of all federal prosecutors in federal courts, circuit courts. Boasberg is a D.C. Circuit Court judge and also previously a FISA court judge, and a number of other special appointments by John Roberts to cover making false judgments in political cases. That's what he does. Also, he's completely corrupt. His wife's corrupt, blah, blah, blah. So, but the point is, you got to go after that. But what you have to do is first knock down the Justice Department. By the way, has anybody heard of anything that the CIA has done since Trump's come into action? Any word anywhere? Susan Rice, anything over there, over in Africa? Oh, yeah, that's right. We're seeing the exit of the CIA from shipping fentanyl across the border now that we actually have people to check them. Those are CIA agents, and if they're MS-13 with tattoos, guess what? Then they are CIA paid agents. Those are CIA assets. So what we are seeing now is that the CIA is backing off. So now the Houthis, who for some reason the CIA just couldn't get a handle on a small group of a very, very small group of 2 sets of terrorists in Yemen, both sides being given money by the Iranian National Guard, what do they call it? Their army, the Iranian army. And then they deny it now because why? Those guys go out. I made a joke, rowboats, I think I called them before. No, they're little tiny fishing boats. And we can't stop them? No, it was because Biden told the entire military and the Navy, don't fire on them. Okay? And remember, the British are in league with them. Remember when they said it was the Houthis who shot their own British ship? This was on TV. They put it on that show Diplomat. And it was a rail gun that was shot from a British ship. The Houthis don't have anything like that, and neither do those Iranian speedboats. That's really what they are. They don't look to me like a fishing boat, but they think that's really a big deal. It's like driving around in their old Toyota trucks in ISIS, thinking they're really cool because they got a 50 caliber mounted on top of it. No, those things are nothing. He can blow those up in a second. So when he just blew up, and then to the day afterwards, what does the Houthis say? Oh, that's it. We're going to war with you. That there will be no war. Those are cowards. They hide behind their children and their women. They hide in churches in mosques, in hospitals, and in schools. Universally, that's what a terrorist does. They terrorize their own people. And that's the reason. You want to know why? Well, I already told you the reason why Schumer had to cancel his book tour. Because he went for Trump and he actually came out before the vote and caused, what, they have to have 7 votes? So he caused 6 defectors because Trump called him a Palestinian. Which is just it's a joke if you understand what Trump was doing and how he insulted him, but that's what it took. Because, you see, Schumer thought people didn't know he was a Jew, or calls himself a Jew. Of course, I don't believe in Jews. There are no Jews. But anyway, the point is he's a Zionist, right? And that's what Trump was calling him. And the second he called him a Zionist, he turned tail and went 180 degrees in the other direction. And this continuing resolution budget, there's good things and there's bad things for it that come out of this. And basically, I would say it's a wash. I think he would have had some more power if he could have kept this going as it was, the old Biden, so they could claw back the money, you see. Because now when you go to claw back money, if the money wasn't spent, there was no crime, unless you're going to attempt to prove fraudulent intent on John Podesta for the $375 billion. But when people say this to me, I want you to understand that is the tip of the iceberg. You have to take every Democratic organization centralized in D.C., and that's what John Podesta runs. You hear Republicans, rhinos and otherwise, again and again and again, we are in a constitutional crisis. You mean, no, we're not. You've been ignoring the Constitution for about 20 years. All branches of government have, including the state governments. So we're not in a constitutional crisis, and we're at the end of democracy. We've never had a democracy, and it just makes me crazy to hear that. And then when they say Democratic Party, people who are stupid believe that means that the only thing we have here, freedom and all of our unalienable rights, are all because of democracy. Well, then you're an idiot, and you shouldn't even be allowed to vote if you believe that, because you don't know a first thing about the founding of America. We are not a democracy. We are a constitutional republic. In 1979, Jimmy Carter and Lord Mark Malloch Brown, who was the assistant head of the United Nations, took away any freedom we had in voting. So we haven't had even a constitutional republic. It failed, and our sovereignty was lost. For we the people, who are supposed to be the governors of this country, we choose representatives that we can recall, that we can impeach, that we can charge with crimes, except you can lie if you're on the floor or the House, Senate, anybody who's a member. Remember, they were exempt from COVID-19 shots. Okay? That's how criminal these people are. 26 million people died, and there ain't a one of them up there, though they lied and they would go and get a saline solution shot. And then they would support the shots to tell you to get the shots, but they didn't get the shots. They were exempt. Nobody in the National Institute of Health, nobody at CDC. Matter of fact, we had people at the CDC who said when they were asked, have your children got the COVID shot, said, hell no. Okay? They knew. They knew exactly what they were doing. And these corrupt people in D.C., you tell me John Podesta didn't know when he created a half a dozen brand new NGOs to take $20 billion and just go and put it in a slush fund he'll come get later? And what about the other? That was $20 billion. But that's nothing compared to the money that has been wasted in other departments, which they haven't even got to. Now let's talk about and I'll just close with this. The last thing we want to talk about is the magic money machine. Elon Musk thinks it's an effing joke to say, why doesn't he just say it in a way that isn't stupid? Here's the reality. We have never had an audit of the government because there is no agency that can be audited. Period. There's no budgets. There's no budget lines. The checks that go out from those agencies, they don't know who they're going to. There's no confirmation. There's no compliance responses. There's nothing. So he calls them money machines, and he said there's 14 of them. Well, that's about what I would tell you. Every cabinet position that has a secretary not only has credit cards that racked up $1.2 billion and beyond frivolous, fraudulent. You can't use federal funds to go gambling and pay for whores. Okay, and that's another thing that just came out. These prostitutes are coming out to reveal, like, is Diddy going to get charged? No, he's claiming innocence. Is Epstein ever going to get charged? No. Will we ever see all the Epstein evidence? Again, folks, we're not talking about Pam Bondi doesn't have any of the evidence from Florida. Okay, that's the evidence that we want. We don't need to see the evidence from New York. And most of the stuff that they have that they just shipped over, these huge files, those are the Southern District of New York files trying to go after the people who are trying to prosecute Epstein and all the people on his list. We've had the list for many, many, many years. We know who's on the list. We know how many flights there were. We know who was there, blah, blah, blah. Nothing happened. Nothing is going to happen from this. And if you think that there are records that the government has held showing who's responsible for JFK, well then, I bet you're one of those people who sit up all night waiting for Santa Claus too, because that's just the stupidest thing you could possibly do. It ain't going to happen. Those records have been burnt a long, long time. What did they just do? They just ordered at USAID not only to shred the documents that are the evidence, but then burn them afterwards. Have you ever heard of such a thing? That's how guilty they are. They have to burn shredded documents in case they can put the shredded documents back together, and everyone there goes to jail. Because why? They're all guilty. But can Trump do anything about that? Very, very little. If you're expecting arrests of Hillary Clinton, it ain't going to happen. Because as I told you, and I've told you 1,000 times, the reason they get away with crimes is because they're not crimes. They made laws and administrative rules that made all this legal. Now, Chevron deference should have stopped federal circuit court judges from ruling against Trump, because that's exactly that. Those are administrative, illegal administrative actions. That's what we're seeing. So you will never audit Mr. Musk. You will never, ever, ever be able to audit a single thing in Washington, D.C., except probably the expenses that Melania spent on the White House. That's probably the only honest records you will ever find there, because everyone else is on the take, sucking from like a vampire from the bloody slush funds, and it has been perfectly legal, and they've covered their asses. And the money's not here now anyway, so good luck trying to claw it back from offshore accounts. So, Mr. Trump, my advice for you today, abnegate every Autopen signature of Biden and go back and write an executive order to reverse it. And make sure history knows, this is because of fraud. You don't have to say that it wasn't Joe Biden who signed them. You just have to say it was the Autopen who signed them, and they're not valid. And Mr. Musk, you need to stop taking so many drugs and start being a little bit more rational for people, and then they might not be burning up your cars and going after your family and everything else. Because remember, Democrats are evil. I could tell you stories about Reconstruction in the South with the Democrats who said that they represented slaves up in Washington, D.C., went down to Mississippi. Blanche Kelso Bruce, I've studied his personal history. And they took every single black representative in Mississippi out onto the lawn and shot them. These are who Democrats are. What happens when they get mad? They shoot a president. Okay? This is what happens. Democrats are out of control, and most of the Democratic leaders are psychotic people. Take a look at them. today on a major news site. It says the new head of the Democrat Party, because it's so failed, is AOC. The idiot who was a Turkish, young Turks. She was a young Turk. She is in fact a terrorist. Her assistant was in fact an illegal alien who was here for 23 years illegally and then just self-deported himself. We know that she has to be cheating on money because she said she couldn't afford to live in Washington, D.C., couldn't afford to live. After 1 week there, she says, this is it. She started crying. And then she starts wearing dresses that are terribly expensive that people gave her as gifts and going on trips and all over the world. And she gets put. No. She's literally, that's the best they have. AOC. You might as well just say her last name should be communism. But she's an idiot. And the Green New Deal, anyone who ever voted for any aspect of the Green New Deal or for climate change never, ever once did one speck of homework on it. And therefore, as a politician, you are not living up to our constitutional republic. You're supposed to represent your constituency. And nobody out here wants chemtrails, and there's not one politician talking about it. Nobody wants climate change by climate manipulation to block out the sun. Nobody. No rational person, certainly no rational American who is so sick and tired of going out and cleaning the junk that falls from the sky that looks like it's poison. They have it analyzed and it's poison and nothing happens. When we start to see the people who are spraying poisons on American prosecuted, and that their name is made public. And we already told you who does it. We gave you the name of the company. We told you where they're flying in and out of, and we actually provided interviews with pilots who were whistleblowers who told you this and showed you inside the planes and showed you the chemicals they're spraying, which are all the ones that are found in the tests. So what we want to see is just simple logic, simple common sense come back. And do not underestimate the enemy. The enemy isn't just Mr. Starmer over in Britain. It's the demons working through him that have been working for thousands of years, literally 2,000, 3,000 years. The same demons have been inspiring the British white supremacist imperialists who have now become corporatists and even sold out Britain. No. We are dealing with demons who are so clever that no human is as clever as them. You can go on to Grok 3 now and you'll think that you're talking to a human being and that it can think. That is the cleverness of a demon, folks. And that's what we're dealing with. And yet the government can't get together even a simple program to be able to keep track of the spending of their money. And by the way, as I pointed out, the debt that arises every year is about 1/10 that gets charged over to the Fed that adds to a $35 trillion debt. That's not from a budget. That's stupid. Nobody keeps track of a budget in D.C. Nobody stays under budget. Nobody even has a budget. They can't even track the checks that the agencies are writing to a budget. So what do? Spend insanely. As he says, magic money machines. They're just printing money, sending out digits. And how about the black ops of the Pentagon? That's trillions of dollars a year in off-book action. Well, who paid for it? Magic money machines. This never stops. And it gets worse because anybody who does business with the government knows that they only have to do, maybe, what was the statistic the other day? They were only keeping track of maybe 60. In all the agencies, their efficiency is rated at about 65%. So 35% of it, and those are the big dollar percentages, those are the big dollars in those 35%, aren't even kept track of. You can't keep track of them. There are no entries made. There's no way to follow it. There's no auditing the federal government. Therefore, close it down because they sure audit us, don't they? And I love their excuses. The other day somebody said from the Social Security, they're making all the permanent, the first year people come in, they were on provisional, they're leaving, and then they said, oh, this is terrible. We're going to have to turn off the phones to Social Security, and we won't be able to answer the calls of desperate Social Security people. Now, anybody out there who's like me, who's been on Social Security before, is laughing because you couldn't get a phone call through the Social Security if your life depended upon it. They have never answered a phone to anyone I know that has ever been on Social Security or any part of it. So that's okay. Don't answer the phones because you never did anyway. Now, I'm being told I need to talk about some woo. Helium that comes from the sun that's turned into ozone and oxygen also creates creates 85% of the rocks and stones we walk on, because that's the inorganic world of silica. Silica rules the inorganic world, but most silicates are mixed with oxides. So when you look at most of the rocks, you'll actually find that oxygen is there. So what is oxygen? Oxygen is in water. Oxygen is in air. It's in rocks. It's pervading most of the area where light goes through. So what is oxygen? Oxygen is fire. And that's what they've always called it. In the ancient Indian times, they would call it a variety of different names that denoted that it was, in fact, breath, the warm breath of fire that came from the being who spoke creation into existence. And when you go back to most traditions, it'll talk about a being, male or female, who speaks creation into existence. And that is, in fact, a vibration. And every vibration is, in fact, whether it has warmth or not, it is movement. It is what they would call fire. And we are beings who are on fire. And the more that we study plasma, and the plasma book is out now on Amazon for those people who are asking about it, it's called The Mystery of Life Found in Plasma. My name's on it, of course. And so when you start studying this, you realize that everything is fire. And now they find out that in Italy, they were able to solidify light. So now they've been able to take light and turn it into air, water, and solid, which is exactly what all the ancient teachings say, that the ethers, warmth, light, sound, and life, come out of Akasha. And Akasha is this fire that I was speaking of. And so that's what we have as we're looking at this. And once you understand the real basic elements, and you understand that everything on the earth is really a maya, it's a delusion, it's an illusion, and then you go out into space and you start to study space, it's quite interesting in my experience, because I've talked with a lot of these people, because I was in the university, and I would talk to professors and stuff, being a teacher there. And I would there were two kinds of people I found who study space, astrophysics and astronomy and stuff. Those who 100% believe in God because of the astounding intelligent design that they find in space, and those who don't believe in God at all, and they're such materialists that no matter what you say, it's always going to come back to them using jargon and numbers to prove what they're saying. But the reality is, when you understand the basic elements of silica, oxygen, carbon, nitrogen, hydrogen, sulfur, and phosphorus, and with their elements that come out of that, like hydrogen peroxide or O3, ozone, or things like that, they're all come from those basic elements. That's all it really takes. And those can be broken down into geometric shapes. They can be broken down into vibrations, into colors, into planetary influences, into the relationship of what part of the harmony of the spheres they're playing, and so on and so forth. So it really comes down to the fact that someone was just asking me, I think, how is it that you say that God is the eyes and ears through the sun and action, through the sun? How is this that could possibly be true? Well, where does all life come from? It comes from the sun. And yet, go ask anybody. Just ask anyone on the street a few questions about this. Can you see light? No. Light's invisible. Can you see water? No. Water's invisible. Can you see warmth? No. Can you see the warmth coming off of a flame? No. Can you even explain a flame? No. Can you explain gravity? No. Can you see it? No. Can you see electricity? No. Can you see any of these forces that end up dying into this world, into the form of the world, That's the deal. And behind those forces, if you get a perspective that is timeless, spaceless, and your consciousness rises up into these seven heavens, as they're referred to in ancient traditions, these atmospheres, then you will be able to see it for what it is, that there are universal laws down here that we can contact that are beings. These are not forces. They are beings coming into this realm, and the forces are the effect of their entering into this realm. So everything you're seeing, unless you can see behind it, and you can see the beings behind it, you just keep on working on that until the point comes when, you're really old and you're looking at your karma. Best way to see the beings behind it is to look at the flow of your karma and its destiny, and the way that, if some certain thing didn't happen, one teensy tiny little 1 second difference, your whole life would be different. And so you can start to see that there are beings that are active in your own destiny. And that's what we're seeing in America right now. We're seeing controlled demolition by 100 wrecking balls that Trump is controlling. And it's the revenge tour. And it's so wonderful because everything they used on him, he's using on them, and they're crying like little babies. So remember, we're all babies. And our best deal is just to fall back into our hearts and realize that what Rudolf Steiner said was true. That not only is our heart a picture of the universe, but the universe is totally and completely filled with an unimaginable amount of love.